It is time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Lawrence, my second time encountering you today, and it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Good evening, Ali. You can help me with this because I don't know much about the stock market. It says here Dow Jones 39,512, S&P 5,224, Nasdaq 16,369, and beside each one of those numbers it says all-time high.
Imagine that, right? This is the stock market that's tanking because apparently Donald Trump's getting elected. It makes no sense. We are seeing strong economic numbers across the board. You and I have talked about this, and I will tell people, because I've had this conversation with people, that Lawrence actually likes talking about economics and knows a lot about it. The stock market is not the greatest indicator of the economy, but it is alongside low unemployment, inflation under control, high GDP growth, increasing wages, and the stock market. It's all firing on most of the cylinders.
And listen, I don't blame presidents when stock markets go down.
Correct.
Or give them much credit when it goes up. But everyone else does. And the news media seems to be able to ignore it when it's Joe Biden's stock market.
You have a great show. I'm looking forward to it, Frank.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you. Well, today, a racist con man who owes the state of New York $464 million told New York State's first African-American attorney general, his words, "Keep your filthy hands off Trump Tower." Of course, because racist Donald Trump is also coward Donald Trump, he would not dare say that directly to the attorney general. Instead, he said it to his followers online in another desperate request for their money. In his unhinged post, here it is, we printed it out, Donald Trump says, "Insane, radical Democrat Attorney General Letitia James wants to seize my properties in New York. This includes the iconic Trump Tower exclamation point." There it is, right there. Okay. A couple of things about Trump Tower. There's nothing iconic about it. It is a plain and boring looking office building with mixed use, including some apartments in Midtown Manhattan, that looks like every other plain, boring office building. No, get those pictures down. That's not Trump Tower. Do not put up those pictures. Those are iconic buildings. Don't put those up when we're talking about Trump Tower. Trump Tower looks like every other boring box that surrounds it in Midtown Manhattan. Iconic buildings in New York, of course, include the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, there they are, whose profiles are known around the world. And there are dozens of architecturally important, beautiful buildings, not quite as famous worldwide as the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building, including the Flatiron Building and many others. Trump Tower, so-called, will never be on a list of iconic or important buildings in New York. And Trump Tower is not a tower by New York City standards. There are over 100 buildings in Manhattan taller than Donald Trump's building that he calls a tower. You can't pick out Trump Tower from an airplane landing at a New York airport or from anywhere else in New York. The only way you know you're looking at Trump Tower is if you're standing right in front of it and seeing that name on the building. That building is going to be torn down someday, like most of the buildings around it, and replaced by a better building. And no one will miss it. On Monday, Donald Trump will run out of time to come up with the money that would allow him to protect his assets from seizure while he is appealing the $464 million civil judgment against him for business fraud in New York State. Telling the Attorney General to keep her hands off Trump Tower sounds like Donald Trump doesn't think he's going to be able to come up with the money that would prevent the Attorney General from putting a lien on that building. And if that's the case, we are about to find out how much of that building Donald Trump actually owns, if any. Because as of Tuesday of next week, Attorney General Letitia James might be going full speed ahead in the process of eventually possibly forcing the sale of Trump properties in order to pay the judgment Donald Trump owes the state of New York. Andrew Weissmann will join us in a moment to discuss that process. That means the next few days and the coming weekend will be the most financially desperate days of Donald Trump's life so far, with surely many more such desperate financial days to come. Today, a group called the National Security Action, which was co-founded by President Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes, issued a white paper describing the security risk that Donald Trump's financial situation now poses. National security professionals have long maintained that large personal debts present a significant counterintelligence risk for those with access to classified information. Notably, Donald Trump's debts rise far above what security and counterintelligence officials find concerning for most government servants, let alone a commander-in-chief. His debts are hardly the only source of concern. His well-established track record of recklessly sharing classified information and use of the presidential office for personal gain demonstrates his willingness to prioritize his own personal profits above the safety of Americans. Experts have also highlighted telltale signs of vulnerability to foreign influence, including erratic behavior, severe financial strain, and anger towards the United States government, all qualities exhibited by Donald Trump. Simply put, Donald Trump's unique and perilous financial situation presents real vulnerabilities for U.S. national security. Earlier this evening, we recorded an interview with former National Security Advisor Susan Rice about the possible national security risk Donald Trump now represents. Joining us now is Susan Rice, who served as ambassador to the United Nations and National Security Advisor to President Obama and was President Biden's first director of domestic policy. Ambassador Rice, thank you very much for joining us tonight. There have been reports for years now, including during the Trump presidency, about Donald Trump's indebtedness and how that is a vulnerability or could be a vulnerability for national security. But with the legal judgments against him now, $500 million, that risk has reached a whole new level. What is your assessment of that current and possibly future risk?
Well, good evening, Lawrence. It's great to be with you again. When you look at Donald Trump's indebtedness and the real prospect that he may not be able to raise through normal banking channels some $500 million or more that he owes, you have to wonder where he's going to get that money from if he is able to get it. And in the event that he has to take that money from an individual or an entity, whether domestic or international, that individual or entity is potentially going to have real influence over him. And so that is of concern when, in particular, when you add it to the reality that we know that, you know, he has a long history of foreign financial entanglements, and he's accepted money from the Chinese Communist Party to his properties. He's in partnership and invested with the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. There's just so many ways in which the whole stench of money from dubious places infuses his business enterprise. And so this would add more questions should that be the case going forward.
Let's listen to John Bolton, who served as Donald Trump's national security advisor, what he says about this.
He is consumed by these troubles. His family is consumed by them. And I think foreigners will try to take advantage of it one way or another. They may be doing it already.
And Ambassador Rice, he's been there. He's seen it up close.
He absolutely has. And I think the bigger point here, Lawrence, is that Donald Trump's former vice president, two of his defense secretaries, two of his national security advisors, a secretary of state, a UN ambassador, all of whom have worked up close and personally with him, have judged him to be unfit and don't think he should serve again as president of the United States. And they know better than you or I could begin to know just how dangerous Donald Trump is for our national security. The big picture is even beyond the foreign financial entanglements. This is a man who has said repeatedly that he would not stand by our NATO allies, that he encouraged Putin to have his way with our European partners and would break up, he claims, and as Bolton validates, the most important alliance in American history, which would leave us and our allies extremely vulnerable. He's continues to praise dictators from Putin to Kim Jong-un, and it's exceedingly dangerous to have somebody potentially try to return to the Oval Office who has already done such damage to our national interests and is promising to do far more.
And this issue intersects with another known Trump issue, and that is the mishandling of classified information, including disseminating it in the Oval Office. He actually revealed classified information to the Russian foreign minister. And then out of office, we know that he revealed classified information about nuclear submarine fleet to an Australian billionaire. There's no information about any exchange of money from the Australian billionaire to Donald Trump. But as both of these issues are present at the same time in the same person, there seems to be a possible intersection of both of those risks.
Yeah, and not to mention he's been indicted, of course, for gross mishandling of classified documents and trying to obstruct and cover that up. The real problem and pattern here is that we have somebody who clearly doesn't put the interests of the United States ahead of his own personal interests. That's the fundamental problem. And when that is the case, the United States is deeply vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation by our adversaries with whom he seems to be most comfortable. So this is really something that people need to be mindful of. He is telling us exactly what he intends to do. And what he intends to do is absolutely antithetical to the national security interests of the United States and fundamentally dangerous.
Ambassador Susan Rice, thank you very much for sharing your experience and expertise with us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good to be with you.
Joining our discussion now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI General Counsel and former Chief of the Criminal Division in the Eastern District of New York. He is the co-author of the New York Times best-selling book, The Trump Indictments. Andrew, for the purposes of this discussion, let's assume Donald Trump can't come up with any money. We get to Monday, we get to Tuesday after the deadline. Attorney General is now free to move against Trump properties. What happens?
So I think that you're going to see the Attorney General first put liens on every piece of property, every bank account that she knows about. She can also seek deposition.
And she knows about just about all of it because of the lawsuit.
Exactly. Yeah. So she has a lot of discovery on what to do, but she also gets to take discovery in aid of enforcement of the judgment. She can also seek to have a receiver appointed. Remember, Barbara Jones, a former federal judge, is already sort of monitoring the company, but she can ask Judge Engoron to appoint a receiver to start this process of seizing assets, not just freezing them, but seizing them. And she will take the steps that she needs to make sure that the citizens of New York are protected.
Just go back to receiver for the audience. Define that role.
So that is very much like a monitor. That is somebody the court appoints to say, I want you to oversee exactly what is happening, what property is out there, what should be frozen, and then come back to me with exactly what you think should happen. So, for instance, it can get very complicated.
The process stops relying on Donald Trump for answers and just has a receiver in charge. And you say to the receiver, how much of that building does he own? We want this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's a player, but he is not the person you're relying on.
Right.
And it can be complicated because let's say that there's a piece of property where a bank has the first mortgage, but the Attorney General wants to have the equity that's on top of that. Mm-hmm. So there you'd have to sort of orchestrate a sale, and you want to make sure that it's a sale. It's as close to market value as you can get. You could have properties that are co-owned, and you have to deal with how are you going to deal with the other owners and how you're going to force a sale there. There are all sorts of complications, but the first task is to freeze enough so that there is the full amount so that Donald Trump can't dissipate those assets. But can I just take a moment just to talk about what Ambassador Rice said? This is sort of, having been in the intelligence community, this is one where this is just not and shouldn't be a partisan issue. What Donald Trump has done, just even leave aside whether he gets the money from a foreign person or an adversary, what he has done in connection to the way he's treated both the intelligence community and denigrated them, and in the way he's treated classified documents, isn't a future harm. That is a current harm to our national security. What Ambassador Rice knows is that in order to keep this country secure, you have to have complete alliances and trust with your colleagues overseas, with the so-called Five Eyes. There are other countries that need to trust that you will keep their secrets and they can work with you to prevent terrorism because it's not in their interest or our interest. All of that is put in jeopardy when they're thinking that this man, Donald Trump, could be back in the Oval Office, because all of those things can become public. And that is not in the interests of our allies and even adversaries who are willing to work with us on this problem. It is an incredibly serious problem for this country now.
And Andrew, the security risk of a man desperate for more than $500 million, who we already know has basically delivered national security information to an Australian billionaire.
Who is, I'm not sure he is capable of thinking of the national security interest of the country and anything beyond his own personal interest. Mm-hmm. And obviously now he has an enormous personal interest to worry about, $500 million reasons to be worried about his own personal interest. But I don't know that he has the capacity, because just the fact that he would take and not return the documents that he had in Mar-a-Lago is unimaginable to anybody who has ever been in the intelligence community. That is a way you would behave with something so important to keeping all of us safe.
Donald Trump's life is going to enter a new phase next week. Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for joining this discussion tonight. And coming up, when the president goes to your state to make a big announcement about increasing manufacturing jobs in your state, if you're a senator, you want to be there. But Arizona Senator Mark Kelly had a job to do in the United States Senate today in Washington, so he couldn't be with Joe Biden in Arizona for that big jobs announcement. But Senator Kelly will join us next.
It's all part of my Investing in America agenda, which has attracted $675 billion. $675 billion in private sector investments and ignited a manufacturing boom in America, a clean energy boom, a jobs boom, all here in America, finally.
And remember, when Donald Trump was president, he did none of that. That was President Biden today explaining the new manufacturing investments in Arizona after his primary win in Arizona last night, where he once again won a larger percentage of the vote in his primary than Donald Trump won in that primary. In the state where Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by just 10,457 votes, Joe Biden won 90% of the vote. In Arizona's Democratic presidential primary, Donald Trump won 78% of the vote. In the Republican presidential primary in Arizona, losing 20% of the vote to Nikki Haley, who dropped out of the race during the early voting in Arizona. And some votes went to Ron DeSantis. Today in Maricopa County, that flipped from Donald Trump to Joe Biden in 2020, President Biden announced nearly $20 billion in grants and loans to the semiconductor company Intel to expand its chip production in plants across 4 states, the administration's largest investment under the CHIPS and Science Act.
This historic funding will use to build new semiconductor fab facilities and modernize and expand existing ones in Arizona, Ohio, New Mexico, and Oregon. Combined, it will create nearly 20,000 construction jobs, many of which will be union jobs. This announcement will also support 10,000 manufacturing jobs, 3,000 right here in Phoenix, with salaries averaging over $100,000 a year and don't all require college degrees. It's going to put us on track to manufacture 20% of the world's leading-edge chips by the end of the decade. It's a fundamental break from the trickle-down economics supercharged by my predecessor. On his watch, companies sent American jobs overseas for cheaper labor and imported products. We're creating jobs in America and exporting American products. My predecessor and his allies in Congress want to go back. In fact, the vast majority of the team on the other side, my Republican friends, didn't vote for the CHIPS and Science Act. The majority of them did.
President Biden thanked our next guest, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, who was a sponsor and lead negotiator on the CHIPS and Science Act, for helping make today's investment in Arizona possible.
Well, we couldn't be here today because the votes in Washington. I want to thank Senator Mark Kelly, who's doing an incredible job and the real champion from the announcement that we make here today. Who's led the partnership with companies investing billions and billions of dollars across the country, bringing semiconductor manufacturing back to America, jobs of the future back to America, including here in Arizona with significant help of Mark Kelly.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Senator, thank you very much for being here. And before we get to Arizona, what was the business in the United States Senate today that you had to vote on?
Well, Lawrence, first of all, thanks for having me on. It was a big day in Arizona. I think one of the biggest that I've seen since I've been in office, clearly the biggest. This CHIPS and Science Act and this grant money is, as the president articulated, great paying jobs you can raise a family on, fixing a national security issue we've had for decades now. With semiconductor chips, the best ones anyway, all being made overseas. I've got a job to do. My job is generally here in Washington, D.C. We had important votes, getting some judges confirmed. These were going to be close votes, and I could not be too far away from Capitol Hill. I would have liked to have been there with the president, but, my job is representing the people of Arizona here in Washington.
And what you were doing today, voting on those judges nominated by Joe Biden, what the president was doing in Arizona, none of that could happen. None of that would be happening with a Republican in the White House. This is what's going on in Arizona was a Democratic initiative.
Well, certainly not with Donald Trump in the White House. I mean, we saw during his administration, he cared about tax cuts for the wealthy and taking away reproductive rights from women. I mean, that was the agenda. President Biden is taking this country forward, not backwards. So this is an exciting day in Arizona and really for our nation. I mean, 3,000 at Intel alone, 3,000 manufacturing jobs. You add TSMC on top of that. We're talking about tens of thousands of jobs in Arizona. When you expand that around the country, and the fact that these are jobs you can raise a family on that do not require a 4-year degree, this is a really, really big deal. It's really exciting.
Let's listen to what President Biden said today in Arizona, speaking to Latino voters.
You're the reason why, in large part, I beat Donald Trump. In 2016, he called Latinos criminal, drug dealers, and rapists when he came down that escalator. Now he says immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. What the hell is he talking about? I need you. I need you badly. I need the help. Kamala and I desperately need your help. Because, look, there's only about 6 or 7 states that are going to determine the outcome of this election. They're toss-up states. This is one of them.
The pressure's on in Arizona. How do you see the Biden campaign winning Arizona this time?
Well, he won it in 2020. I mean, that was when my, first election was, and the president won Arizona by 10,000 votes. He could do that again. He's got a record to run on, not only bringing chip manufacturing back to the United States, but reducing the price of prescription drugs for seniors. The bipartisan infrastructure bill. President Trump didn't do anything that was bipartisan. I mean, he was focused on cutting taxes for the wealthy and taking away rights from women. So this president is going to move the country forward. I think Arizonans get that. And when you consider, Trump's language about migrants and about immigrants poisoning the blood of America, well, I mean, my response to that is that's just un-American. I mean, that's not who we are as a people. Joe Biden knows who we are, knows where this country needs to go, and I'm confident that he's going to win in Arizona. He won by 10,000 votes last time. I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can to make sure he wins by more in the 2024 election.
Senator Mark Kelly, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. And coming up, Congressman Joe Neguse, the newest member of the House Democratic leadership team, who is also the youngest member of the leadership team, will join us on a day when Republicans were once again completely humiliated in their public, nationally televised hearing. Or, as Ranking Member Jamie Raskin put it, quote, the most spectacular failure in the history of congressional investigations. That's next. Our next guest is the son of refugee parents who fled the East African country of Eritrea in the 1980s and settled in Bakersfield, California, where Congressman Joe Neguse was born. The family moved to Colorado, where Joe Neguse went to college and law school at the University of Colorado. As a member of the House of Representatives, Joe Neguse became the youngest impeachment manager in history, prosecuting Donald Trump in Trump's second impeachment trial in the United States Senate.
What more could we possibly need to know about President Trump's state of mind? Senators, the evidence is clear. We showed you statements, videos, affidavits that prove President Trump incited an insurrection that he alone had the power to stop. And the fact that he didn't stop it, the fact that he incited a lawless attack and abdicated his duty to defend us from it, the fact that he actually further inflamed that mob, attacking his vice president while assassins were pursuing him in this Capitol, more than requires conviction and disqualification. We humbly ask you to convict President Trump for the crime for which he is overwhelmingly guilty of.
Today, at age 39, Joe Neguse became the youngest member of the Democratic leadership of the House of Representatives when Democrats elected him without opposition to serve as assistant Democratic leader, replacing South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn, who announced last month that he was stepping down to make way for younger leadership. On Assistant Democratic Leader Neguse's first day in that position, the Republican majority in the House was once again disgracing themselves by making a mockery of impeachment in a hearing where Democrats repeatedly humiliated the Republicans' failed attempt to find something, anything, for an impeachment case against President Biden.
With any luck, today marks the end of perhaps the most spectacular failure in the history of congressional investigations, the effort to find a high crime or misdemeanor committed by Joe Biden and then to impeach him for it. In prior hilarious episodes of this long-running madcap series, America got to see the following. 1, nearly 20 fact witnesses who could not identify a single act of wrongdoing by President Biden, much less a high crime and misdemeanor, and who overwhelmingly testified that Biden was not involved in any of his family's business adventures. 2, 3 expert witnesses called by the majority itself who said nothing that they had seen in the tens of thousands of pages of documents adduced by the majority even remotely approached the level of a high crime and misdemeanor. Bank records which show exactly what all the witnesses told us, that Joe Biden was not involved in his family members' businesses. Repeated voyeuristic displays of pornographic images by the majority, completely irrelevant to any conceivable legislative or investigative purpose. A star witness, Gal Luft, who turned out to be a Chinese agent and an illegal arms trafficker on the run from American justice.
Joining us now for his first interview since being elected Assistant Democratic Leader of the House is Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse. Thank you very much for joining us on this important night for you, your first night in this role. Where is the House of Representatives going now after that hearing that we saw today?
Well, good to be with you, Lawrence. Good evening, and thanks for having me on. I couldn't have said it any better than Ranking Member Raskin, of course, my fellow impeachment manager, the lead impeachment manager during the impeachment, second impeachment, rather, of former President Donald Trump. It's a sad state of affairs, unfortunately, right now in the 118th Congress with a House Republican caucus that is mired in chaos and dysfunction and has been so for the better part of the last 14, 15 months. And perhaps the most salient example of this is this failed impeachment effort, a frivolous impeachment effort that has no basis with respect to evidence, no cogent articulation of how any of what they've alleged would meet the constitutional standard for impeachment, which, as you know, Lawrence, is a very exacting one. And of course, the American people understand well what a high crime and misdemeanor is because they witnessed it firsthand with respect to former President Trump's conduct on January 6th, which of course led to the impeachment trial, the clips of which you showed. So I wish that the Republicans would get serious about governing and work with us in a bipartisan way to address the consequential challenges we face as a country. Unfortunately, they seem disinclined to do so.
I want to listen to one more thing from the hearing that Representative Stephen Lynch had to say. Let's listen to that.
You've actually provided more evidence to impeach Donald Trump for a third time than you have in so much as laying a glove on President Biden. We keep on hearing about the Biden family. When you hear someone say the Biden family, that translates into we have no evidence on the president, so we're going to use the Biden family to try to implicate President Biden. But by the constant bumbling and continually shifting arguments here, you've done nothing more than exonerate President Biden.
And of course, Congressman Neguse, all of that's distracting from what should be the real business of the House of Representatives right now, urgent issues facing the House, including aid for Ukraine. Is there any possibility of a discharge petition being used by the Democrats to try to get to a vote on Ukraine aid?
Well, I would say first, Lawrence, you've articulated the central frustration of so many members of Congress, and I think ultimately the frustration that the American people are feeling right now as they watch these impeachment proceedings, which have become sort of devolved into a circus, that at the end of the day, it obfuscates away from the real challenges that the American people face and the need for us to address them. House Democrats under Leader Jeffries have offered a compelling vision to lower costs, to grow the middle class, to build safer communities, to address our national security concerns, as you mentioned, with respect to aiding Ukraine. House Republicans refuse to work with us in good faith on the same and instead waste time on these political witch hunts. With respect to the discharge petition that you mentioned, as you know, a discharge petition has been filed by Ranking Member McGovern of the Rules Committee, and there are a large number of members who have signed that petition. But at the end of the day, the question becomes one for Speaker Johnson. Is he willing to ultimately put on the floor a bipartisan bill that passed the United States Senate with 70 votes, which, as you know, Lawrence, from your time in the Senate, is no easy feat. This is a bipartisan proposal that has broad support amongst the American public. Speaker Johnson refuses to put it on the floor, and I think that that's a shame, and we shouldn't assume that he or this body is impervious to public opinion. We ought to make clear our desire, our request that he put it up for an up or down vote on the floor.
And there's a lot more governing to do. The Senate, Chuck Schumer, is moving through appropriations bills, the bills that actually fund the government. The House doesn't seem to be moving on that at all.
Well, I will say this. Leader Jeffries, from the outset of the 118th Congress, made clear we would extend the hand of partnership and bipartisanship. Ultimately, what we need is a governing partner on the other side. And I think he, the leader, the ranking member, Rosa DeLauro, who, of course, you've had on your program many times before, have done a masterful job negotiating a set of appropriation bills to ultimately fund the government. Lest we forget, we've had 3 government shutdown showdowns this year, all averted because of the leadership of congressional Democrats led by Leader Jeffries and, of course, working in partnership with Leader Schumer and President Biden. So, look, hope springs eternal, Lawrence. We're going to keep trying to convince our colleagues to see the light and work with us in good faith. There's a lot of work to do.
Assistant Democratic Leader Joe Neguse, thank you very much for joining us tonight for the first interview with your new title.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. And coming up, there won't be the bloodbath that Donald Trump is predicting when he doesn't win the Electoral College. It's not going to happen. But now Donald Trump is trying to take back his bloodbath prediction and claim that he was actually talking about a bloodless bloodbath. That's next. If I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath. Those were Donald Trump's words on Saturday, and he has been trying to run away from those words ever since. And his millions of followers online are trying to convince people that Donald Trump predicted bloodbath was not about people. It was about cars. But cars don't bleed. People do. Our next guest, Brian Klaas, wrote, "The bloodbath comment was at a rally that began with Trump saluting as he listened to a version of the national anthem sung by people in prison for violently trying to overturn an election on January 6th. If you think he's just talking about the auto industry, you're delusional. Trump routinely uses dog whistle language that maybe you could give the benefit of the doubt to if you ignore literally everything about his past rhetoric and conduct. He has a long track record of using violent rhetoric, and he already inspired a violent mob." Joining us now is Brian Klaas, an associate professor of global politics at the University College London and contributing writer for The Atlantic. He is author of Fluke, Chance, Chaos, and Why Everything We Do Matters. All right, Brian, we are going to listen together to the offending Trump statement about bloodbath. Let's listen to that.
Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
So it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. He did not say it's going to be a bloodbath for the auto industry or it's going to be a bloodbath for Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to understand Donald Trump's words is always a bit of a puzzle at these rallies. But I think that even if you were to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one, even if you were to ignore everything he has said, all of his conduct since 2015, you have to think about the way that he handles rhetoric all of the time, right? I mean, he in the opening to this rally, he was referencing the January 6th jailed people as hostages, as true patriots. He was referencing the idea he was going to basically do something about getting them out of prison on the first day he's in office. And a couple months ago, he floated the idea of executing America's top general. He floated the idea of shooting shoplifters. He's got rhetoric that he's constantly used about police being harsher on people they're arresting. He's talked about, shooting looters and so on. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. Every bit of opportunity that Trump can take to incite or stir the pot, he takes. And so if we are going to then take this one quote and imagine that it exists in some sort of vacuum, it's just beggars belief. It's the last, 8 or 9 years didn't happen in order for us to fall for that. And I think there's a constant barrage of incitement to violence that Trump has been doing since he started running for president in 2015.
And he wants to scare people. He wants people on the Democratic side of our politics to be afraid of that, to think he wants them to think he means literally bloodbath. But in fact, he's no longer capable, I believe, of summoning the kind of crowd that he got on January 6th, because most of them are in jail now, and the mothers of the rest of them won't let them leave the house when Trump opens his mouth about that sort of thing. But the fear is what he wants. That's part of the way he actually appeals to those people who cheer for that, is the hope that it does make people afraid of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fear is certainly part of it, but I also think it's worth remembering that January 6th or an event like it doesn't require millions of people. It requires thousands. And so in a country of 330 million people, there's this term stochastic terrorism, which is the idea that if you have a very high-profile figure who's inciting violence, a small number of people will act. And there's already been people who have been arrested, who've gone through the judicial system, who have referenced Trump as they've been committing crimes, as they've been using violence, totally separately from January 6th, right? So I think the idea that we hold him to the lowest possible standard is just always the way that we treat him, right? Oh, he might have meant the cars, therefore it's somehow okay. It's not, because when there is a moment that you need to lead the country and you need to try to damp down the impulses to violence among your extremist supporters, we always just sort of hold him to this low barrier of the standard that says, oh, well, maybe he possibly meant something else. And I just think at some point you have to say, look at the full picture. There have been 8 or 9 years of incitement to violence that Trump has perpetrated. And he already did incite a mob that attacked the Capitol. So to imagine that we can just simply imagine that there's one vacuum for this specific phrase it's beyond belief to me.
Right. And when you look at the text of it, the more I look at the text of it, the more it specifically does not say the auto industry. And what would a bloodbath mean in the auto industry? Would that mean the United Auto Workers would go out and create a bloodbath? Anyway, Brian Klaas, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Tonight's Last Word is next. There was another big winner in Ohio's primary last night. David Hogg first introduced us to Christine Cockley last week on this program. She is one of the 30 young candidates David's group Leaders We Deserve endorsed. Last night, Christine Cockley beat 6 other candidates to become the Democratic nominee for Ohio's 6th State House district, which includes Columbus. She posted, "We won. Thank you so much to the voters of Ohio House District 6 who put their trust in me. I am proud to be your Democratic nominee, and I promise to always fight for you, lead with empathy, and advocate for our most vulnerable neighbors. Onward to the general." Christine Cockley, Democratic nominee for the Ohio House of Representatives, gets tonight's last word.